First, we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Chun-Han Yoon from the San Diego Supercomputer Center, who's done a lot of work with grid, web, and computing environments, and in particular has worked, I understand, with various projects like the Geoscience Network, Network for Earthquake and Engineering Simulation. And today he'll be talking to us about his work with OpenTopography, creating a gateway to high-resolution topography data. So Chun-Han, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. This is very correct, my introduction. The PI, Biswanas, Nandingam, lead the OT project right now. And then, Min Pan is like a principal, technical developer at OT project. Okay, this is outline. I will talk about 3 introductions for like OpenTopography and application software, for the TAU-DM, terrain analysis using digital elevation model, and the Opal toolkit. So, and then, I will also like talk about, more like information, implementation detail, what I did, for the OT project as a ECSS, consultant. So the last one is, I just, have a lot of, screen dump for the test example. Actually, this like project objective is, to develop and deploy enhancement into OpenTopography data facility to manage and process high-resolution topography data on AXIS HPC resource. We are focused on 2 tasks. First one is we integrate OT system with the new Comet AXIS HPC resource at SDSC. Second, we developed newly adapted job manager for the open source Opal toolkit to ensure compatibility with like Slurm job scheduler on the Comet. What is OpenTopography? Yeah, OpenTopography is a very long-standing, NSF data facility project. So it provides community access to high-resolution, earth science-oriented topography data and related to resource. OT has several, special data access function and geoprocessing application packaged as a web service across multiple backend servers. So OT aims to increase the amount of high-resolution topography data available online style. Also, OT enhanced the web-based processing capability with a focus on computationally intensive tasks. So OT has been performed in a lot of community support, such as software tools, tutorial, show course, and then workshop, etc. Okay. So right now, this is OpenTopography statistics and the impact. So OT is one of top resource for LiDAR data provider, as well as top 10 for the like free GIS data. So currently OT has more than 75,000 users. They are ran in about 280,000 custom processing jobs via OpenTopography portals. So additionally, via like OpenTopography API, has another jobs 372,000 jobs. So also like OT has a very strong impact on earth science, for each research. So comparing, 2011 publication and 2017 publications based on, several science domains. So the number of, scientific publication has risen, sharply right now.
Chunhan, can I ask a quick question?
Okay.
Those data that you presented, are those from 2017, all of them? The number of jobs, or is that all time? Do you know?
Yeah, actually PI, Bishu provided this slide, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This is OpenTopography architecture. So basically, we just like divided into 3 tiers. First one is application tier. Application tier like belong to usually like OpenTopography data portal, and also like third-party applications such as like command line toolkit. And as OT also has a service tier, they have like a bunch of like different web services. So such as data subsetting services, grading service, and the REST processing service, and visualization, etc. Also, like OT has their infrastructure for the managing custom data management system. OT has several different type of data, LiDAR, point cloud data, and REST elevation data, and deliver the raster, or something like that. So OT also has, several geo-processing, algorithms. Yes, P2G or like a streaming tin algorithm, and also like a format translation algorithm, and then visualize. Yeah, actually, OpenTopography, portal access, to the web services, and the web services connect to our OpenTopography resources. Okay, so next task is, we are like OT also like providing, derived product, for the processing, hydrology area. So TAU-DM stand for terrain analysis using digital elevation. TAU-DM is actually TAU-DM, developed by the University, Utah State University. David Taberton is main, principal developer. So TAU-DM is a channel network and the watershed delineation software. So it was developed as a C++, command line executable function. Also, it is used MPI, MPG2 used for the parallelization. So TAU-DM also, is used for the terrain analysis software for the hydrology area analysis of DMs. So TAU-DM is adapted as a science drive and community service to connect OT project, as well as cyber GIS project. So because OT provides the capability to derive DM and geotiff format from high resolution LiDAR data that can serve as input to hydrology analysis using TAU-DM. TAU-DM was optimized by Exceed ECSS team. Yang Lu actually had worked on optimization for the TAU-DM. So we're gonna use like this optimization TAU-DM version, which means it is a very performance is very fast, speed up, you know. So, and also the TauDM functions are wrapped as Opal web services on the gateway node. So OpenTopography, you know, integrate main key, you know, TauDM function into standard OT cloud processing workflow. So this slide, you know, shows the general model to deriving hydrologically useful information from raw digital elevation model data. The first step in, you know, hydrologic terrain analysis is pit removal. With DM with pit removed can be used to calculate flow directions for each grid. Once the flow directions have been calculated, qualify the flow field, TauDM has several tools for deriving flow-related terrain information, such as the area contributing to each, you know, grid cell. The path, you know, taken by flow-related terrain, you know, information, and you know, serve like watershed and a stream net. Now, this is like OT, just like taking, you know, this kind of a Bayesian model provided by, you know, TauDM shoot. Okay. This Opal toolkit, we're gonna use like Opal toolkit as like OpenTopography middleware. So Opal is basically open source toolkit developed at SDSC. Opal allows the users to wrap scientific application as web services without any modification to scientific code. So Opal allows, you know, both web forms-based access and the programmatic access of all applications. Opal currently supports SOAP-based, you know, web service access to number of popular applications, such as, you know, NBCR, National Biomedical Computation Research Center, and then OpenTopography. So many workflow tools can be, you know, accessed to science application as well. So Opal provides interoperation with other application via web service interface. So in the like application, you know, developer perspective, you know, they are only focused on scientific tool and workflow development. Okay. Opal is based on standard WSDL, WSDL, you know, Web Service Description Language and SOAP API for management of the scientific application. So Opal provides a template for the WSDL. This WSDL has operations to launch jobs and query job status and retrieve job output. So Opal has the ability to transfer input file using base 64 encoded binary format, MIME attachment, and third-party transfer, like, you know, global file transfers. Opal has a, you know, dashboard for accessing application and usage statistics as well. So it, you know, performed the automatic, you know, integration generation using Opal owns XML specification for the command line argument. So Opal has the ability to connect, you know, multiple resource provider and scheduler at the backend right now. So fork, type, and then Condor and the PBS scheduler. Okay. This is system architecture, you know, what we did for like ECSS support, you know. So usually like as an Opal client, you know, service, you know, consumer and science gateway are like targeting, you know, to use Opal API. So build like a SOAP and the HTTP protocol. So, and on the gateway node, Opal Web Service Toolkit is deployed into Apache Tomcat, and Opal Toolkit, you know, store a lot of, you know, job, you know, information into PostgreSDB right now. So also like Opal, you know, Toolkit manages, you know, job out on the like a gateway start, you know, coming from computing cluster via SSH connection. Right now, Opal, like, you know, submit and then, you know, monitoring and then monitoring jobs and then transfer files to build like SSH connection. We are using like SSH credential for the community account, you know, OpenTopography. Okay. We configure like a common system, you know, for like a job management. So we installed TauDM Suite using Intel Embedded 2 IB, GNU compiler, and CMake, and other libraries. So based on that, you know, also like, you know, on the commit, we have like an application repository that contains, you know, TauDM script and then binary pseudocode. So we need also like, you know, we set up like a temporary job repository, which has like, you know, this is like a starting point, you know, just commit start, you know, run the job, run the like scripts, and then, you know, generate output into, you know, stages input files as well. Okay. So main, you know, implementation steps are as follows. First of all, we implemented the Opal job manager for managing, you know, SLAM scheduler. So this means Opal basically like has like, you know, this kind of a style, like pluggable, like, you know, job manager style. This means, you know, we are able to like, you know, using factory, you know, programming paradigm styles. So, and the second step, we created Opal configuration files for the scientific application. So, and then we deployed the application as web services using Opal deployment mechanism. That this is done by, you know, Apache Ant. So example like Ant deploy, and then what is your service name and application configuration file, something like that. Then after that, you know, users can now access this application as web services via a unique URL. So which is used only for the programmatic access of the application. This means, you know, each unique URL has their own wizard. Wizard is for the like client, you know, information. So, okay. This is one of like Opal application configuration XML examples. So Opal defines, you know, application metadata. So first, this left side, you know, column actually defined like application info, you know, and such as usage and like, you know, something like application information. In the middle, usually like defined like information about like a command line argument. So what is this means like input, you know, So this is a tag I minus I, your input parameter type is a file, and then IO type is input, this description. This is IO type input, but this should be like a .tar, like a GG, format. And then also like a DM URL, what is your URL data set. And the right side, just like define where is your like application location, of execution on the server. Like this like a binary location, on the like a commit, This is also like, as I said, before, yeah, commit has like a temporary job, directly. Then, the TauDM, script and execute code should be in there. And like, just like, job manager, specified. This is a Slurm job manager can be used for running, these jobs. Okay. In order to do that, one more thing is, we like create, application script for the like TauDM, binary executable code, because, so this is like OT, specification. The edge input, OT perspective, edge input, has like a URL, So this means like this yellow, that part is, this we use like input staging part. So second one is, usually like after that, IB, run, MP, number of process, and then we are like a script bin, with pit remove, and then, input and output. After that, also like, we just like tar up, TauDM pit remove output. This is script, Okay. Then after that, Opal generate like a Slurm script file like that, This is the Slurm like Shaba, the fetch account name and the job name, queue name. We just usually like a TauDM, yeah, one node is enough. Like, this is basically, one node commit has like 24 cores, We just like set up the work time 30 minutes and then 2 nodes. But this is a small jobs right now, So that, yeah, something like that. Okay, that, as I said, this is temp Oasis, scratch like directory. Temp project, and then, so we just TauDM pit ran. Okay. Also, like we provide, this is just like an Opal service list, After deploying all 6, TauDM key function into Opal, Opal has like a list displayed, service list like that, So, yeah. Also, like Opal on, like has their own like jobs, submission forms. This is a very simple, task. But this is in the like application config XML file, we just based on this XML file, they just automatically generated this submission form, So how many cores, and then, so input types, then, output file name. After that, submission status, job code 2 is execution. Then, okay, job is successful. But this Opal also itself provide a very simple application, submission form as well. Okay. Also, like Opal provide, this is the Opal dashboard, screen dump. So this is 1 month, from the July 17 to August 17, So how many like TauDM jobs ran, during this time? So this is a daily average execution time for a job, that's displayed. So, and then, per day, yeah, several things, Okay. Actually, okay, next step, MinFA has, integrated this like TauDM, web services into OpenTopography portal right now. So I just like, tested one LiDAR data set, Tecton Conservation Distribution Wyoming area. So this is a Google map. This is here, like, the polygon, this is the LiDAR data area. So I just like set up, study area as bounding box, So, and then you see like right side, DM generation, we use the like streaming thin algorithm for the tau DM. And then on the like right side, the bottom, I just, check it up all tau DM, thing. Tau DM, functions, 6 functions. So, and then submit jobs. Okay. This is also OT, monitoring example. This is a very nice like capability provided by OT, like your job, is like progress, when it's done, this is like a very nice, capability, provide that one. Okay. And then, as I said before, OT basically, generated a data product, for the users, wherever you can download any, data set, here. And then also you, OT provide, visual like relation product. Okay, and last, this is summary. We were able to deploy Opal Toolkit on the gateway node and the tau DM chute of the Kami cluster that was, allocated to this project. So we have integrated the key tau DM function into standard OT cloud processing workflow, generated the hydrologic data product. So this it enhances, the value of use of this data in the hydrology research by providing access to this computational product without user having to learn tau DM or run HPC. So that's all my talk. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, so it took so long time.
Juhan, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Thank you for that very interesting talk. When you said that Opal, you can do like an ant deploy and then generate this entire wrapping around your application, and what ultimately you get is a URL. Now that URL, how does it handle security then if it's a URL that's open to, or is there a way you can secure that URL? Oh,
okay. Basically, Opal Toolkit has like, IP strict like, limit like access, things, So we, right now we are like, set up the like a white list, for the like IP based system. That means OpenTopography where like your, services are accessed. So we just got a like IP address and then into the like Opal Toolkit, So that means like that service only allowed to for the like this, IP address right now. Yeah.
Okay, and is there a way for it to track users then?
Oh.
Like anybody, even though now you're in the IP, and so any machine on that IP can hit that URL, but what about the individual users? Is there a way to track them?
Oh, then, basically, OT provides 2 types of users. One is like guest users, the other is logged in users, We know like, user like statistics, via the like OpenTopography portal right now. So
okay.
That's the way, we know about it.
Okay, so it's kind of a front end to the Opal stuff. Okay.
That's right. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chunhan, for a very interesting talk. And I found my unmute button, and glad that Mona could jump in quick with a question. It sounds like there may be some interest generally in the Opal toolkit itself, and you've shown us a very nice application of that to OpenTopography. Are there other questions for Chunhan? Feel free to jump in, unmute, or add a chat. Did someone unmute?
Actually, this is Mona again. I have another question.
Yes.
About the Globus interface to Opal. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Chun-Han?
Yeah, I think, yeah, actually, Robos has a lot of progress, a lot of progress right now. So at that time, this is a long time ago, about like 2010 and then 2000, yeah, about around 2010, So like Suriname, like, has integrated, Robos like a gram, management style, So I don't think he just like, integrated, Robos like a file transfer stuff, just like a manage, Robos gram manager right now. So yeah, right now we don't have any, Robos like a file transfer interface with Oppo right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, thank you very much, Chun-Han. And we will have the slides and the video and audio from these presentations available on the Symposium webpage after the Symposium. So thank you again. And we'll go ahead then. We're at the time, so we'll go ahead with the presentation from Yang Wang from PSC. And Yang has worked for a long time in the things he'll be talking to us about, this electronic structure calculations. And in particular, I know his work on the LSMS code, which has been a multiple Gordon Bell Award winner. So I know he's done some great work there. So I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Yang Wang, who will be talking about developments of multiple scattering theory method.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Can everyone hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So we'll start now. So the title is showing here. Let's see. Wait. Why my slide doesn't go further? Okay, here I have to use my mouse. All right. Okay. So this work has involved my collaborations with several ECSS projects. People are interested in using this method for their calculations, which the collaboration including Professor Mark Jarrell had some done with him about some project involving multiple scattering theory, and Professor Xiaoguang Zhang and Professor Kaushik Dale, who we are working on right now, and also advising his student, Shohan Sen. And also a student who has worked with me, Xiangling Liu. Now he's a postdoc at Oak Ridge National Lab using this method. So I give a brief outline since I only have like less than half hour. So I'll give you a brief overview of what multiple scattering theory is, and talking about these two methods within this multiple scattering theory, and they are designed for ab initio electronic structure calculations. And also I'll mention some development and applications. So in generally speaking, for the electronic structure calculations, that given a material that's made out of many nuclears and with electrons, which electrons occupy the big majority of the space, which acting as a glue, bring all the nucleus together and forming materials. To essentially determine the electronic behavior, you can pretty much determine the behavior of the materials. So that's a fundamental problem for material science, for computational material science. The thing is how to determine the electronic behavior, because there are so many electrons. If you write down the quantum mechanical equation, which is a many electron Schrödinger equation, you want to solve, but unfortunately, it's impossible to do that. So the best tool now we have is called density functional theory that allows to convert the problem into this one electron problem, that the many electron problem becomes one electron moving in the effective field. Effective field basically takes care of the quantum mechanical effect of all the other electrons and recognize that there are many electrons there. So basically they are solving this one electron problem that moving in the effective field. So the question is, what is the electric field, the effective field? So that involves kind of solving this, the equation I'm showing here. This one electron Schrödinger equation that with this particular, this potential called exchange correlation potential that takes care of a quantum mechanical effect. That this is original problem was like a many electron problem. And there's So that's being recognized in this. So basically what is determining was the exchange correlation potential. So the whole calculation involving these two steps. One step is just solve this with this effective field and solve this one electron Schrödinger equation. And then by solving that, you construct this electron density and the sum over all the states up to the Fermi energy, where up to the point electron fill up the whole energy band. So the total number of electrons is supposed to be the number of electrons in the system. And then if the charge density is not converged by comparing with the previous step, then if it's not converged, then you just use that to reconstruct this effective potential. And then going back into this original Schrödinger equation and solving this just self-consistently. So by if the process becomes self-consistent, that is the incoming row and outgoing row is the same. The difference is very tiny. So they consider that your calculation is converged. Then use that charge density can calculate this total energy of the original many electron system. So for the ground state structure, the energy is supposed to be at minimum. So that's the whole idea of the electronic structure calculations. There are many different methods exist. Mostly popular one are based on plane wave and the pseudopotential. But the different methods differ in the way how to solve this one electron Schrödinger equation. So the method I've been working on for many years is based on multiple scattering theory. It's known as Kroninger-Kohn-Rostocker method by these three gentlemen. The one in the middle is Kohn, who is also the developer of density functional theory. He got a Nobel Prize for the theory. So what is multiple scattering theory? That is, it is also known as a KKR method, also known as a green function method. So in this theory, that the effective potential is considered as a collection of non-overlapping electronic scattering potentials centered at each atom. That is, you divide the whole space into regions. Each region contains an atom. That each small region is considered as a scattering potential. That electron being scattered by this collection of scattering centers. So essentially, treat the problem as a scattering problem. So the block states, which the solution of the electronic state in material, is just essentially just a standing wave solution of this one electron multiple scattering process. So it's an all electron problem. That is, we can solve this not only for the valence state but also the core states. So unlike other arbitration methods, it's not based on a really rich variation. So we don't take any variation. The solution essentially is an exact solution. And also, because it's based on scattering approach, you can construct green function, so that there's no need for the band structure calculations, and no need to we don't calculate. Essentially, we don't calculate block waves, because if we can determine the green function, you can avoid calculating wave functions. If we know Green's function, so we don't have to deal with normalization and orthogonalization of wave functions. Given the Green function, we can determine charge density directly. So that's the charge density is the essential quantity we want to calculate. Based within this multiple scattering theory, people have been developed like KKR, RSMS, which is ORIEN version of the KKR method, and other methods like combined with a CPA, you can deal with like random alloy problems and other methods. Oops, the heck going on? Okay, so how do we write down the Green's function? Given the space, little region there, I want to calculate the Green's function within that region. The formula is given right here. The Z here is a function of the single side solution. It's a single scattering solution. The tau here is a multiple scattering matrix. So this is basically the first expression. It tells how to write down the Green's function of this multiple scattering problem. And then you can rewrite that in terms of like tau minus t. T is a single side t scattering matrix. So you can write down this second expression, that the second term is a single side Green's function. So either way, they're just the same thing. You just write down in a separate of a different expression. So what's difficult part is the so-called irregular solution. It's a little bit difficult to calculate because it blows up at the origin. But numerically, we'll find a way to deal with this problem to avoid calculating irregular solutions. I'll explain that later. So what's this multiple scattering matrix tau? It takes care of the scattering properties, that the fact that the electron being scattered about multiple times by different atomic sites. So each atomic site, its scattering property is described by this called T matrix on the diagonal. The off-diagonal elements are just a geometrical structure constant. Just only thing, the input is where the atoms are. What atom itself determines the T matrix. So it's put on the diagonal terms. So all the whole T matrix, it takes the inverse. It takes the nth a block. It gives you the so-called tau matrix, which is is a property of this the multiple scattering problem. Yes.
So normally we think, at least as chemists, that these electrons are not completely scattered by these atoms, but they actually are somehow attracted by the nuclei, and they go around.
Okay. Yes, you can think. Yes, for the core states, they are turns out they are the poles of the scattering matrix. For the valence states, they are things. They become a continuum spectrum. It's called a resonance state. There's a resonance curve there, but they all can be described in terms of a scattering matrix.
Okay.
For the bounding state, they are essentially the core states, and for the non-bounded, they are the valence states. They can all be described in terms of scattering theory.
But you are not computing the any of these states explicitly, right?
Okay, for the core states, we can compute it with a slightly different method. You can use so you can solve the Schrödinger equation by applying the boundary condition that the wave function is 0 beyond atomic radius. Or 0, it means some kind of functions that. So you can solve that way. That's give you the core states. But for the valence states, they are, because of periodic boundary conditions, you cannot do that anymore. So you have to deal with using this multiple scattering approach. But they can all be formulated in within this framework.
Okay.
Okay. Anyhow, so if the system is periodic, then all the T matrix is the same, and this whole tau matrix, this matrix inversion can be converted into this k-space approach that you end up having this k-space method for calculating the tau. So there's two different ways of calculating this multiple scattering matrix. One is a real space, or there's a k-space approach if you have a periodicity in the system. Okay. So having this Green's function, the advantage of that is you can calculate charge density by taking the imaginary part of it. Of course, you integrate the Green's function over the energy spectrum. You get then take the imaginary part to get the charge density. Or you calculate density of states by integrating the space. Then you take the imaginary part to get a charge density, to get the density of states. So that's kind of approach based on Green's function, not based on the wave function approach. The wave function I'm talking about the block wave, the whole crystal wave function, okay? Not the single site Z and the J's I'm talking about. Okay, so this the approach is based on Green's functions. So knowing the Green's function, you can calculate charge densities. Okay, other arbitrary methods is based on calculating the wave functions and using wave functions to construct charge density. But here we can calculate Green's function directly and then take take the imaginary part of Green's function and calculate charge density. So that's two different kind of type of approach. This is based on scattering theory. Oh, okay. So in this whole formulation, and the charge density is divided into like core states and the valence states. So valence states are calculated in the Green's function method. Core states, as I just mentioned, that we solve the differential equation by applying, because we know exactly the boundary condition is, we can calculate core state. They are basically the bound states, so it's easy to solve. So that the total energy is expressed in such a way, and where the band energy, which is the second term of total energy, is calculated using Green's function using this formula that involves the integration from the bottom of the band to the Fermi energy. But this integration can be carried out in the complex plane. The reason for doing that, because the band structure essentially are the poles of Green's function on the real energy axis. So we try to avoid the integration of the energy over the real energy axis, try to avoid poles. So that's why we take a complex contour integration for doing that. So I can draw a picture like this for the core and the core state, like deep core, semi-core. They are just kind of bound state. It's like delta functions on the real energy axis, like this, right? But for valence states, essentially they have like a broad spectrum. They are continuous. They are essentially this kind of jiggling curves, and then you try to integrate this whole thing to calculate energy. For the deep core and the semi-core, because they are bound states with the energy is discrete. You can just add them up. But for the valence states, you can't do that anymore. You have to do this integration. So one thing to do that is we don't integrate over the real energy axis. Rather, we take the complex contour. So to avoid poles. Then in the complex energy plane, the Green's function becomes smooth. So this integration is quite easy to carry out by you can putting some Gaussian points on the contour. Then it takes like only 30, 40 points. You calculate the Green's function on those energy points, and then add them up. You get a very nice and a very accurate integration. So this is the general approach. That is for the valence states. Essentially, that's what you do. It multiply here because you have considered that spin up and spin down states. So you apply the 2 electrons per state. Alternatively, you can by doing the things as follows: that you take the difference over this contour integration, and then the single side difference is the multiple scattering Green's function with and the single side Green's function, and then on the single side Green's function you integrate over the real energy axis, because for the single side the Green's function is quite the Green's function is smooth because they don't have poles on the real energy axis, but rather the curve is quite smooth, except they have the called resonance states. So this integration should be fine. That's how we do. But by doing that, we can avoid calculating irregular solutions. As I mentioned before, irregular solution is a little bit difficult to calculate, but by doing this way, it makes the calculation become feasible. So to avoid calculating the irregular solutions. Okay, so that's the kind of general approach for the multiple scattering theory. But that kind of calculation is still is an order cube is m cubic problem, because as I mentioned before, you have to deal with like a big matrix inverse to calculate the multiple scattering matrix. That size of the matrix is proportional to the number of atoms per unit cell. The periodicity, if you have a unit cell that you repeat it, to represent the structure of the material, that unit cell should repeat itself for fill up the whole space. The number of atoms in the unit cell that determines the size of that matrix have the inverse. So that essentially is a cubic n. This order 3 n cubic problem. So to make that to make the calculation simpler, the way we can do that is by draw a sphere around each atom. Say pick up atom I, you draw a sphere that by ignoring the multiple scattering process beyond that region, essentially your problem becomes the number of the complexity of the calculation becomes only involved atom within this sphere, right? This box essentially is the size of the unit cell. So that's for the ith atom. I just draw this sphere. Then I'm only interested in the multiple scattering process which is within that sphere. I do the same thing for the atom J. I do the same thing for each atom within this unit cell. So essentially, you end up have to just solve this multiple scattering problem within this sphere. This sphere is called a local interaction zone. And ignoring atoms outside of that, you just put that vacuum there. So essentially, the computational, the complexity is proportional to the number of atoms within the unit cell. Of course, the matrix, you have to inverse the size of that is determined by the number of atoms within the LIZ rather than the number of atoms in the unit cell. So that makes the calculation become order n. So that's the crux of this so-called LSMS method. So the computational cost depends on the number of atoms within the local interaction zone, and but the computational cost totally depend linearly on the number of atoms in the unit cell. So it's intrinsically parallel because you do the calculation for each atom in the unit cell, and so this essentially allows calculation for more than 10,000 atoms or even more. And then we can do this little fancy things about using multi-level of parallelization using MPI groups. So we can have a multi-level of parallelization. And this approach has been winning 2 Golden Bell prizes, one for the overcoming the teraflop bottleneck. The other one is exceeding the petaflop performance. Also has some other awards here. So we did this LSMS approach because this kind of made this kind of approximation. So compare with the exact solution, which is KKR solution. So you can see how big the local interaction zone requires to be in order to make the 2 solutions to be the same. So essentially that tells the size of the local interaction zone. You can see that as large, the local interaction zone become larger, and then the 2 solutions become agree with one another. So this is a weak scaling of LSMS measured on a Titan at Oak Ridge National Lab, where it used that many nodes. The calculation takes advantage of the GPU acceleration that for the GPU is used for accelerates the inversion of that matrix. This is a little bit details about how the calculation was done, which is done for the bulk iron calculations. For that many atoms, 65,000 atoms, so it's on that many nodes. So that's you get like a 96% of scaling this efficiency. For details of this measurement and the discussion of the algorithm, you can find in this chapter of this particular book written by Marcus and myself. So also another project I worked with no longer with Professor Zhang is about implementing so-called a Masbara frequency in the calculation. That is, sometimes we require to introduce electronic temperature into the calculation. That is by bringing this Fermi-Dirac distribution function into the integration of the Green's function by adding multiply this factor. Because you integrate from negative energy to the positive energy, so infinity, because we introduce this distribution function with temperature T here. Now consider that this function has a pose in the complex energy plane. So end up, you can, by a complex analysis, you can see that by using residual theorem, this integration can become a summation over the poles of this distribution function. Those poles are the Masbara poles. So essentially you can end up, add this up by calculating the Green function on those poles. But the problem is those are infinite poles. So this is essentially requires many terms to have to add. So that's kind of very difficult to do. Then Nichols and John, 10 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, proposed this method that you can approximate this Fermi-Dirac function by a different function, which has finite poles. But now later on, Professor Zhang, now at that time he was a scientist at Oak Ridge National Lab. Now he become a professor now at the University of Florida. He later on proposed this Gaussian quadrature method by to calculate this approximate Fermi-Dirac distribution function, so that it can only lead like less than 10,000, less than 100 Gaussian quadrature points by adding that. So it greatly simplified the calculation. That allows calculation of the introducing finite temperature into the arbitral calculations. So I by working with him, I implement this feature in this multiple scattering method code. Another calculation we have done that is in the full potential calculation. Consider that this tri-density disputes in the whole space. Solving this electrostatic problem turns out it's a non-trivial problem. So what we did is that we break that into two systems. One system is non-overlapping tri-density. Another is smoothly overlapping, smoothly varying tri-density. So this adds up to give rise to the original tri-density distribution. Of course, we have to add and minus rho zero so that to guarantee each system is charge neutral. Then we use a multiple moment method to calculate electrostatic potential from this system, and using Fourier transform method for this system. So the solution of these two solutions of this two distant systems added together will give the electrostatic potential. So recently we implement P3D FFT method to the code, so that our FFT is parallelized thanks to the P3D FFT package. So another thing I want to mention that we also this code can perform Hellman-Feynman calculation, calculating the force on each atom, because of the fact that KKR method is an exact solution. So there is no so-called Pauli force which suffer in some other arbitral methods. In KKR method, we don't have this problem, so there is no such a Pauli correction. So we can calculate force acting on each atom if there's any displacement. So this is a little some kind of comparison. Molybdenum. So we compare our calculation for the mechanical properties with full potential KKR with other with plane wave based methods. So this and compare with the experiment. So there's agreement is quite excellent. It's using two different approaches, right? One is our approach, another is a plane wave based pseudo potential method. Of course, you can if you displace atoms, you can measure the force acting on each atom. So the force based on KKR method and the force calculating based on plane wave method. So you can see this it's force in between these two different using two different density functionals based on quantum based on plane wave, which is quantum espresso method. So it's just falling in between this. With of course you can do LSMS, which is order n calculations. If your local inclined zone is large enough, you basically force around this KKR method, KKR result. So I need to wrap up quickly. And also we have done lately with the relativity effects of the materials. So you can study all different relativity effects using this code. The reason the relativity effect come into the picture is that recall this a Bohr's model, that if you look at Bohr's model, the Bohr radius electronic orbital is given by this expression, and the speed of electron is given by this expression. Obviously, it's proportional to z, and so in particular, for the first orbital, if the electronic speed is given by this. Alpha is the so-called fine structure constant, which is fortunately is 1 over alpha is 137. Essentially, it means that z cannot be greater than that. Otherwise, speed of the electron will be greater than speed of light. So essentially, they tell you that when higher the z, the higher the speed of the electron. And the relativity effect is that if you're sitting on the electron, you see the distance between nucleus and yourself become shortened. Essentially, that cause the bond length contraction problem. The interesting relativity effect of material is that why the gold has a golden color, it's because of relativity effect. Another interesting effect, why the mercury is liquid at room temperature, is also a relativity effect. So our code can do by solving the Dirac equation, and based on Green's function method, we can calculate relativity properties of the material. You can compare the copper, silver, and gold. They have different z's. Obviously, copper has less relativity effect, but silver and gold shows quite a significant effect by looking at the density states. So that's a kind of, if you look at this is a description here. All right. Finally, about time as a summary. So we have developed a full potential multiple scattering method that we can do both non-relativistic, scalar relativistic, and fully relativistic calculations. Both KKR and the Earth mass methods for evidential electronic structure calculations, and we can calculate Hellman-Feynman force calculations. And also made this public release of the code, which can be found on GitHub on the MST suite MSC2 and the PSC EDU MSC2. Anybody interested in using this, you're welcome to download it. And this is a Green's function technique and some kind of little technical details about how this is done to avoid calculating irregular solutions, which is different from other groups in Germany. In Germany, they do things a little bit differently, but this is our approach to avoid calculating irregular solutions. And the ongoing ECSS work involves called LSMS with LIZ embedding, because for the so-called embedding is the local interaction zone, as I mentioned, that is assumedly embedded in a vacuum, but it can certainly by embedding so-called effective atoms, which opens a totally different opportunity for us. And in the scattering theory, this type of calculation it's possible. It's still all-the-n calculation, except the effective medium, you can play with it, and there's tons of great physics you can do with it. I guess that's all I want to say. It's about, I use my half-hour time, and if anybody has questions, please.
Yang, thank you very much for this impressive tour de force. I understand a few things better than I did before. And just want to open up for a quick question or two. If anyone has a question for Yang, are there questions?
So Yang, does the time depend on the z, the radius in the local approximation?
Yes. Yes, in principle, when the radius is infinity, you get exact result. Exact means that KKR result. That's exact. As I mentioned,
so what about the time? Does it also become in that sense?
I mean the computational time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because the computational time is a n-cubic problem for the number of atoms involved in that sphere.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, it's all the n means that in terms of number of atoms in unit cell, the computation time is a linear scaling in terms of the number of atoms in the unit cell. But still is an n-cubic problem for the number of atoms within the local interaction zone.
Okay.
Any other questions for Yang? Great. Well, Yang, thank you again. I understand, I think the ongoing ECSS work, as I've had a chance to read a little bit about that, has to do with applying this code to other types of materials. Like in particular, what I was reading is looking at semiconductors, for example, and some of the promising applications of that. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So very.
Yeah, some kind of localization problems. Yeah.
Right. I think that has to do with the LIZ embedding that you were talking about. Is that right? Okay, great. So some more exciting things to come from Yang and his work with these groups. So thank you very much, Yang, for presenting this. And again, the slides and the presentation itself will be online at the Symposium website. So we thank everyone for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.